Sarah Chen stood at her office window, watching the morning sun rise over New Geneva. The diplomatic capital of human space looked peaceful in the early light. Gardens stretched between the gleaming buildings where Earth's best negotiators worked to keep the galaxy calm. Ships from dozens of alien species landed and took off from the spaceport, carrying delegates who came to Earth for help with their problems. For 300 years, humans had been the galaxy's peacekeepers. Other species fought wars over territory, resources, and old grudges. But when things got really bad, they called the humans. Earth's diplomats had stopped 17 major wars and countless smaller conflicts. They were good at finding solutions that made everyone happy enough to stop shooting. Sarah wasn't a diplomat. She was Admiral Chen, the highest-ranking military officer in human space, but even she spent most of her time on peacekeeping missions. The human fleet was small but well-trained. They protected trade routes, stopped pirates, and made sure no one started fights near peaceful worlds. It was good work, and Sarah was proud of it. Her communicator buzzed. "Admiral, we have a priority message from the Kepler system." Sarah smiled. The Kepler talks had been going well. The Zephyrian Confederation wanted to claim the mineral-rich system, but the local species who lived there didn't want to be conquered. Human mediators had been working for months to find a peaceful solution. Yesterday, they had announced success. Everyone would share the resources fairly, and no one would be forced to leave their homes. "Put it through," Sarah said. Ambassador Marcus Webb appeared on her screen. He looked tired but happy. "Good news, Admiral. The Zephyrians signed the treaty an hour ago. The Kepler system stays free, and everyone gets what they need." Another war stopped before it started. Sarah nodded. "Outstanding work, Marcus. How are the Zephyrians taking it?" Marcus paused. "Not well, honestly." Emperor Kaithgar looked angry when he signed. He kept talking about human interference in Zephyrian affairs. But what's done is done. The treaty has full galactic backing. After the call ended, Sarah felt uneasy. The Zephyrian Confederation had been getting more aggressive lately. They controlled 12 species and had one of the largest fleets in the galaxy. More troubling, they had been pushing the limits of galactic law. Their weapons were getting more destructive, their territorial claims were getting bolder, and they clearly didn't like humans stopping their expansion. But Sarah pushed the worry aside. Tomorrow was the Festival of Unity, New Geneva's biggest celebration. Diplomats from across the galaxy would gather to celebrate another year of peace. Her daughter Lisa would be there with her grandchildren. They lived on New Geneva, where Lisa worked as a cultural liaison between humans and alien species. The Festival of Unity was always Sarah's favorite day of the year. It proved that different species could work together. Humans danced with insectoid klaxons. Crystalline Vorthons shared food with mammalian deltons. Children of a dozen species played together in the parks. It was everything the human diplomatic mission stood for. The attack came at noon. Sarah was in her office, watching the festival on the news feeds, when the alarms started screaming. Emergency broadcasts flooded every channel. Zephyrian warships had dropped out of hyperspace around New Geneva. They weren't responding to communications. They weren't following any rules of engagement. They were using glass bombs. Glass bombs had been banned by galactic law for 2 centuries. When they exploded, they turned everything in a huge area into crystalline glass. Buildings, vehicles, people, everything became frozen. Transparent statues that would last forever. It was considered the cruelest weapon ever created. Sarah watched in horror as the bombs fell on New Geneva like deadly rain. The festival crowds had no time to run. Families holding hands became glass sculptures. Children playing in parks became crystal statues. The beautiful government buildings turned into transparent tombs filled with glass people who had been alive seconds before. The Zephyrian fleet fired for exactly 7 minutes. Then they jumped back to hyperspace, leaving behind a world of glass. 2 billion people had died, including thousands of alien diplomats who had come to celebrate peace. Sarah's hands shook as she tried to call her daughter. The communication networks were gone. The spaceports were glass. The entire planetary government was dead. Everything she cared about on New Geneva had been turned into a crystal graveyard. Emergency reports came in from across human space. The attack had been perfectly timed. Every major human diplomat was on New Geneva for the festival. The entire Terran diplomatic corps was dead. The United Earth Council was gone. In 7 minutes, the Zephyrians had destroyed 3 centuries of human peacekeeping leadership. But they had missed something important. They had killed the peacekeepers, but they had left the military alive. Sarah stood in the command center, watching the reports come in. Around her, human military officers worked with cold efficiency. These weren't diplomats. These were soldiers who had spent their careers learning how to fight, even while their leaders chose peace instead. Admiral Torres looked up from his console. "Ma'am, we have confirmation. The entire diplomatic leadership is gone. Emergency protocols are now in effect." Sarah nodded. Emergency protocols meant the military was in charge until new civilian leaders could be chosen. But Sarah wasn't thinking about temporary command. She was thinking about her grandchildren, who had been glass statues now for 2 hours. She activated the galaxy-wide communication system. Every species would hear this message. Every government would know what had changed. Marcus Webb somehow had survived. His ship had been in orbit when the attack came. His voice was steady when he spoke, but Sarah could hear the cold anger underneath. "This is Ambassador Marcus Webb of the Terran Federation. I speak for humanity with the authority of our emergency government. The Zephyrian Confederation has committed genocide against our diplomatic capital. They have murdered civilians, children, and diplomatic guests from across the galaxy. They have broken every law of civilized warfare." Sarah watched alien news feeds react to the announcement. Some species expressed sympathy. Others seemed worried about the political implications. A few seemed to think this was just another diplomatic crisis that could be solved with negotiations. Marcus continued speaking, and Sarah knew the galaxy was about to learn something important. "The Terran Federation hereby declares total war against the Zephyrian Confederation and any who support them. We have spent 300 years building peace across the galaxy. Now you will all learn what we built that peace upon." The transmission ended. Across human space, military bases that had been quiet for centuries began to wake up. Factories that had built medical equipment and farming tools started converting to military production. Research stations that studied alien cultures began studying alien weaknesses instead. Sarah looked out at the crystal ruins of New Geneva one more time. Then she turned to her officers and began planning humanity's first real war in 300 years. The Zephyrians had wanted to see what humans were like without their diplomats. They were about to find out. Emperor Kaithgar laughed when he heard the human war declaration. He stood in his command center on the Zephyrian flagship, surrounded by his military advisors. They were all looking at intelligence reports about human military capabilities. The numbers made them feel very confident. 800 ships, General Vextar said, reading from his datapad. Their entire fleet has 800 ships. Most of them are small peacekeeping vessels. They have no experience in real warfare. Their weapons are designed for police work, not military combat. Kaithgar nodded. The Zephyrian Confederation controlled 12,000 warships. They had been fighting wars for centuries. Their weapons were the most advanced in the galaxy. Their soldiers were trained from birth for combat. Compared to them, the humans looked like children playing with toys. "How long do our analysts think this war will last?" Kaithgar asked. 6 months at most, Admiral Korath replied. "The humans will fight hard at first because they're angry, but they have no industrial capacity for war. They'll run out of ships and ammunition quickly. When they realize they can't win, they'll surrender and beg for mercy." Kaithgar smiled. "And what mercy will we show them?" "None," Korath said. "They've interfered in Zephyrian affairs for the last time. After we defeat their fleet, we'll occupy their worlds and put an end to their diplomatic meddling forever." Across the galaxy, other species were making their own calculations. The hegemony of suns, old enemies of the Zephyrians, quietly contacted human military leaders. They offered to share intelligence about Zephyrian fleet movements. They didn't think the humans could win, but they hoped humanity might weaken the Confederation enough for the hegemony to gain some advantage. The merchant guilds reacted differently. They immediately cut all trade agreements with human space. Their leaders met in emergency session to discuss the economic implications of the war. Guild Master Seklon made the decision that would cost them dearly later. "The humans are finished," he told his council. "The Zephyrians will crush them within a few months. We need to distance ourselves from Earth before we get caught in the fighting, cancel all human contracts, move our ships out of their territory. When this is over, we'll negotiate with whoever controls human space." The Crystal Assembly, a group of peaceful species that often worked with human diplomats, sent messages of sympathy but offered no help. They were pacifists, who wouldn't fight even to save their friends. The Machine Intelligence Collective calculated that human resistance had a 2.3% chance of success, and decided to remain neutral. Even the Galactic Council, which had worked closely with human peacekeepers for centuries, voted to monitor the situation, rather than take sides. But while the galaxy's leaders made their plans, something strange was happening in human space. Dr. Elena Vasquez, chief of Terran military intelligence, sat in her secure bunker deep under Geneva base. She was reviewing reports that would have surprised the alien intelligence services watching humanity's preparations. The reports weren't about ship numbers or weapon stockpiles. They were about people. Every human citizen in alien space was coming home. Merchants who had lived on alien worlds for decades suddenly sold their businesses and booked passage to Earth. Scientists working on joint research projects requested immediate transfers. Human children in alien schools were withdrawn by parents who claimed family emergencies. Even more puzzling, these movements had started before the attack on New Geneva. Dr. Vasquez reviewed the timeline carefully. The first group of humans had left alien space 6 months ago. Right after the Kepler negotiations began, it was as if someone had known what was coming. She pulled up the classified files that explained everything. Protocol 7 had been activated the moment Zephyrian forces started massing near human space. It was a plan that had been developed centuries ago but never used. Every human citizen had been quietly notified to prepare for emergency evacuation from alien territories. Protocol 7 was based on a simple idea. If humanity ever had to fight a real war, they would need every citizen working for the war effort. More importantly, they couldn't risk having human civilians used as hostages or human intelligence assets captured by enemy forces. Dr. Vasquez sent her daily report to Admiral Chen. "Ma'am, Phase 1 of Protocol 7 is complete. All human civilians have been extracted from alien space. Industrial conversion is proceeding on schedule. The Zephyrians estimate our fleet at 800 ships because that's all they've seen. They don't know about the shipyards." Admiral Chen was standing in a facility that officially didn't exist. Deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, hollowed-out rocks contained the most advanced manufacturing complex humanity had ever built. For 3 centuries, these hidden shipyards had been maintained and upgraded, just in case diplomacy failed. The facility was enormous. Production lines stretched for kilometers through artificial caverns. Automated systems worked around the clock, building ships that no alien species had ever seen. These weren't the multi-purpose peacekeeping vessels that patrolled human space. These were pure warships, designed by engineers who had spent centuries studying every military conflict in galactic history. Commander Rodriguez guided Chen through the facility. "We can produce 50 ships per week at current capacity," he reported. "We have raw materials stockpiled for 2 years of full production. The first battle group will be ready in 3 weeks." Chen nodded as she watched the massive ship taking shape in the main assembly bay. It was twice the size of the largest Zephyrian battleship, with weapons systems that incorporated technologies the aliens had never seen. More importantly, it was designed to work with other human ships as part of a networked fleet. "What about crew training?" Chen asked. "Already completed," Rodriguez replied. "We've been running combat simulations for decades. Every merchant captain, every mining engineer, every space station operator has received military training without knowing it. Their emergency drills were actually war games. Their safety protocols were combat procedures. When we activate the reserve fleet, we'll have experienced crews ready to fight." Chen smiled grimly. The Zephyrians thought they were fighting diplomats and peacekeepers. They had no idea they were about to face a species that had been preparing for war longer than their civilization had existed. Meanwhile, Emperor Kaithgar was making his final preparations. His intelligence reports showed no change in human military activity. Their merchant ships had stopped coming to Zephyrian space, but that was expected. Their fleet positions looked defensive, which suggested they were planning to wait for the attack rather than take offensive action. They're scared, General Vextar concluded. They're pulling back to defend their core worlds. They probably hope we'll be satisfied with conquering their outer colonies. Kaithgar studied the tactical displays. Human space controlled about 50 star systems, mostly agricultural worlds and mining operations. Nothing that looked particularly military. The humans had always been more interested in growing food and building habitats than building weapons. We'll crush them quickly, he decided. Full invasion of their outer colonies first. When they see how easily we take their worlds, they'll surrender to save their home system. Admiral Chen received the intelligence report about Zephyrian fleet movements from her hegemony contacts. The enemy was planning exactly what she had expected. They would attack the outer colonies first, trying to force a quick surrender. She sent orders to her field commanders. The Zephyrians were about to learn their first lesson about fighting humans. Those agricultural colonies weren't just farms. They were fortress worlds that had been preparing for this moment for 3 centuries. More importantly, the Zephyrians were about to discover that human intelligence was much better than they realized. Every Zephyrian ship movement was being tracked. Every communication was being intercepted. Every battle plan was known before the enemy commanders finished making them. Dr. Vasquez smiled as she reviewed the latest intercepts. The Zephyrians were so confident that they weren't even using proper communication security. They had no idea that human cultural exchange programs had been intelligence operations. Those friendly human anthropologists studying alien societies had been mapping military capabilities and weaknesses for generations. The galaxy thought it knew humanity. They had seen humans for 3 centuries as peaceful merchants and clever diplomats. They thought human restraint came from weakness rather than choice. They were about to learn the difference. The Zephyrian First Fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Proxima Colony expecting an easy victory. Admiral Korath stood on his flagship's bridge, watching the tactical display show the human agricultural world ahead. Intelligence reports said Proxima was a simple farming colony with maybe 1,000 human settlers. It should surrender without a fight. Sir, we're detecting some unusual readings from the planet, Lieutenant Vash reported. The surface installations are much larger than our intelligence suggested. Korath wasn't concerned. Probably expanded their farming operations. Begin the bombardment. We'll give them one chance to surrender, then glass the military sites. But when the Zephyrian ships moved closer to Proxima, hidden weapon platforms rose from what had looked like grain fields. Massive railguns emerged from underground silos disguised as storage barns. The farming colony revealed itself as the most heavily fortified world the Zephyrians had ever encountered. Korath stared in shock as his tactical display lit up with targets. How many weapons does this planet have? Sir, I'm reading over 200 defensive platforms. Energy output suggests military-grade shield generators protecting the entire surface. This isn't a farming colony. It's a fortress. Before Korath could respond, 12 human warships materialized from behind Proxima's moon. These weren't the small peacekeeping vessels from Zephyrian intelligence files. They were massive battleships, unlike anything in the galactic databases. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Ten's Retribution, humanity's new flagship. Around her, the ship's crew worked with calm efficiency. These weren't nervous peacekeepers facing their first battle. They were professional soldiers who had been training for this moment their entire lives. All ships report ready for combat, Admiral, Commander Torres announced. Chen nodded. Begin engagement. Execute Plan Alpha. What happened next became known as the Proxima Massacre. The 12 human ships moved like parts of a single organism. Their actions coordinated by quantum communication systems that made them function as one vast intelligence. Zephyrian ships that tried to target one human vessel found themselves under attack from 3 others positioned perfectly to exploit their blind spots. The human weapons were unlike anything the Zephyrians had faced. Instead of energy beams or kinetic projectiles, they used predictive targeting systems that fired at where enemy ships would be, rather than where they were. Zephyrian pilots found their evasive maneuvers anticipated and countered before they could even begin them. Most terrifying was the cold efficiency of the human attack. There was no wasted motion, no unnecessary destruction. Each shot was precisely calculated to disable Zephyrian ships with minimum energy expenditure. The humans weren't fighting angry. They were fighting with the mathematical precision of engineers solving a problem. Commander Kashvol, captain of the Zephyrian destroyer Bloodclaw, watched in horror as his fleet died around him. "They're not fighting like any species I've seen before," he reported to Admiral Koreth. "They're predicting our movements. It's like they know what we're going to do before we do it." In exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, 59 Zephyrian ships were floating dead in space. The 12th human warship hadn't even fired its weapons. Admiral Koreth found himself alone on his bridge, his crew dead from the kinetic shockwave that had crippled his ship's life support. His communications array was damaged, but he could still receive transmissions. A human voice came through the static, speaking with polite formality. "Attention surviving Zephyrian personnel. This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Federation Navy. You have attacked our civilian population in violation of galactic law. Your fleet is destroyed. Surrender immediately, and you will be treated according to the conventions of war." Koreth's ship was dying around him, but he managed to activate his emergency beacon before the power failed completely. His final transmission reached Emperor Cathgar 3 hours later. Cathgar stood in his war room, staring at the holographic display that showed the complete destruction of his first fleet. Around him, his military advisors were very quiet. The comfortable assumptions they had made about human military capability were crumbling. 12 ships, General Vextar said quietly. 12 human ships destroyed 60 of our best warships in 4 minutes. How is that possible? Cathgar was wondering the same thing. His intelligence services had completely failed to understand what they were fighting. These weren't the peaceful merchants and diplomats the galaxy knew. These were warriors who had been hiding their capabilities for centuries. "Get me a direct link to our intelligence department," Cathgar ordered. "I want to know everything about human military technology. I want to know where these ships came from. And I want to know why our analysts didn't see this coming." Intelligence Chief Sekmoran appeared on the communication screen, looking nervous. "Sir, we're reviewing all our data on human capabilities. The ships they used at Proxima don't match anything in our databases. The technology appears to be completely new." "Impossible," Cathgar said. "You don't develop advanced warship designs overnight. These ships took years to build." "Oh, that's what worries me, sir," Sekmoran replied. "If the humans have had these ships for years, why didn't we know about them? Where have they been building them? Our surveillance of human space shows only the 800 peacekeeping vessels we've always known about." Cathgar was beginning to understand the scope of his problem. The humans hadn't just hidden their military strength, they had hidden entire fleets and production facilities. For centuries, while appearing to be peaceful merchants, they had been building the infrastructure for war. Dr. Vasquez was reviewing the battle reports from Proxima with quiet satisfaction. Everything had gone exactly as planned. The Zephyrians had learned their first lesson about fighting humans, but it was only the beginning. "Admiral, the enemy response is proceeding as expected," she reported to Chen. "Cathgar is pulling back his advance fleets to reassess our capabilities. He's also demanding answers from his intelligence services." Chen nodded. "Good. Confusion is our ally right now. How long before they figure out the scope of our preparations?" "Our analysis suggests 6 to 8 weeks, Vasquez replied. "Their intelligence networks are good, but they've been looking at us through the wrong lens for so long that it will take time to adjust. They keep trying to understand us as peaceful merchants who suddenly got lucky, rather than warriors who chose peace until now." Chen walked to the tactical display showing human space. Red markers indicated Zephyrian fleet positions, while blue showed human forces, But most of the blue markers were invisible to enemy sensors. Hidden shipyards, fortress worlds disguised as agricultural colonies, and weapon platforms built into asteroids that looked like mining operations. "What about our main battle fleet?" Chen asked. "Assembly is proceeding on schedule," Commander Rodriguez reported from the asteroid shipyards. "We'll have 200 capital ships ready within 6 weeks. The full battle fleet will number over 3,000 vessels when construction is complete." Chen smiled. The Zephyrians thought they had destroyed humanity's military leadership when they glassed New Geneva. They didn't understand that human diplomats and human military were completely different organizations. The diplomats had chosen peace. The military had prepared for war. Emperor Caithgar received the updated intelligence report 3 days later. His analysts had been working around the clock to reassess human capabilities. What they found made him very worried. "Sir, we've identified at least 15 human installations that don't match their official purposes." "Intelligence," Chief Sek Moran reported. "Mining operations that require more energy than their stated output could support. Research stations in locations with no scientific value. Agricultural worlds with defensive capabilities that rival military bases." "How many ships do they actually have?" Caithgar asked. Sek Moran hesitated. "Sir, we honestly don't know. Our previous estimates were based on visible fleet movements in normal space. If they've been building ships in hidden facilities, they could have significantly more than 800 vessels." Caithgar studied the star charts showing human space. For 3 centuries, the Zephyrians had seen these systems as peaceful backwaters inhabited by soft diplomats and farmers. Now he was realizing those farmers had been building weapons while his own people assumed they were growing crops. "What do you recommend?" he asked his military advisors. General Vextar looked uncomfortable. "Sir, I suggest we reassess our strategy. The humans are clearly more capable than we anticipated. Perhaps we should consider a negotiated settlement." Caithgar's anger flared. "Absolutely not. We committed to this war when we destroyed their diplomatic capital. There can be no negotiation with the humans now. If they want to fight, we'll show them what real military power looks like." But privately, Caithgar was beginning to worry. The humans had surprised him once. He couldn't afford to let them do it again. He needed to know what he was really fighting before he committed his main fleet to battle. What he didn't know was that Admiral Chen was counting on exactly that hesitation. Every day the Zephyrians spent trying to understand human capabilities was another day for the human war machine to reach full production. And once humanity's true fleet was ready, the war would be over very quickly indeed. 6 months after the war began, Admiral Chen stood on the command deck of her flagship, watching the final approach to Zephyr Prime. The enemy homeworld hung before them like a blue-green jewel, protected by the largest defensive fleet in galactic history. 3,000 Zephyrian warships surrounded their capital, ready for the final battle. Chen wasn't planning to give them one. "Dr. Vasquez, initiate the Zephyr Prime protocol," she ordered. Dr. Elena Vasquez nodded from her position at the cyber warfare station. For months, human intelligence teams had been infiltrating Zephyrian computer networks. What the aliens thought was their greatest strength, their completely automated planetary infrastructure, was about to become their greatest weakness. "Beginning systematic infiltration," Vasquez announced. "All teams are in position." On Zephyr Prime, Emperor Caithgar was preparing for humanity's final assault. He had learned to respect human military capability over the past months. The humans had systematically destroyed every Zephyrian outpost, conquered every allied world, and defeated every fleet sent against them. But this was different. This was the Zephyrian homeworld, defended by their entire remaining navy. "Let them come," he told his advisors. "We have 3,000 ships here. Even if the humans have been hiding their true fleet size, they can't match that kind of firepower." General Vextar was less confident. "Sir, every engagement has shown that human ships are superior to ours in individual combat. Their coordination and tactics are beyond anything we've encountered. Perhaps we should consider evacuation options." Caithgar's anger flared. "We are Zephyrians. We do not run from soft-skinned mammals, no matter how clever they think they are." But at that moment, the first signs of human attack began. It wasn't the massive space battle Kaithgar expected. Instead, his planet's traffic control systems suddenly malfunctioned. Orbital platforms designed to guide ships safely to landing zones began targeting each other with their guidance lasers. Commercial vessels found their navigation systems directing them into collision courses. In the planet's main command center, technicians watched in horror as their own infrastructure turned against them. The orbital defense platforms, controlled by automated systems that had worked perfectly for centuries, began firing on Zephyrian ships instead of protecting them. "Sir, we're losing control of our own systems," the chief technician reported to Kaithgar. "Something is rewriting our command codes faster than we can restore them." Dr. Vasquez smiled as her teams executed humanity's most sophisticated warfare technique. For 300 years, humans had been the galaxy's technology experts, helping alien species maintain and upgrade their computer systems. What none of them realized was that human engineers had been installing backdoors in every system they touched. "Weather control satellites are now under our command," one of her technicians reported, initiating severe storm protocols over all Zephyrian military bases. On the planet's surface, massive storms began forming over every airfield and army base. Hurricane-force winds grounded the Zephyrian Air Force. Hail destroyed ground vehicles. Lightning strikes disabled communication towers. The planet's own weather control system was being used as a weapon against its creators. But the psychological warfare was even more devastating. Every communication channel on Zephyr Prime suddenly began broadcasting the same message. Images of the crystal ruins of New Geneva filled every screen, the glassed remains of children's playgrounds, the transparent statues of families who had died holding hands during the Festival of Unity. Ambassador Marcus Webb's voice accompanied the images, speaking with calm formality. "This is what you chose, instead of peace. These were our children, our diplomats, our friends from across the galaxy. They died because you decided that conquest was more important than negotiation." The broadcast continued for hours, showing every detail of the New Geneva massacre. Zephyrian civilians saw the alien diplomats who had died alongside human families. They saw the memorial gardens where peace treaties had been signed, now turned to crystal graveyards. They heard the voices of survivors, describing the moment their world became glass. Most disturbing was the final message: "This is what we choose instead of war." The broadcast showed human rescue workers pulling alien survivors from the ruins, human medical teams treating injured Zephyrian prisoners with the same care they gave their own wounded, human engineers rebuilding worlds that Zephyrian forces had damaged during their retreat. Emperor Kaithgar watched the broadcasts from his palace, realizing that the humans were fighting a different kind of war. They weren't just trying to defeat Zephyrian military forces. They were destroying Zephyrian society's willingness to fight. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 colony worlds," General Vextar reported. "Our own people are giving up without being attacked." Kaithgar couldn't understand it. "Why are they surrendering? The humans haven't even reached those systems yet." "Sir, the humans are offering very generous terms. Full protection under galactic law. No occupation forces. No punishment for civilian populations. They're only demanding the surrender of military forces and war criminals." As the days passed, more Zephyrian worlds surrendered to human forces that hadn't even arrived yet. The psychological campaign was working better than any military assault. Zephyrian civilians were learning that humans fought with the same precision they brought to diplomacy, targeting only what needed to be destroyed while protecting everything else. The merchant guilds, watching their trade networks collapse as system after system chose human protection over Zephyrian rule, sent desperate envoys to Admiral Chen. Guild Master Seklon appeared on her communication screen, looking defeated. "Admiral, we formally request mediation of this conflict. The guild networks will provide any assistance needed to restore peace." Chen's response became legendary across the galaxy. Her voice was polite but absolutely final. "For 300 years, we offered you our children as mediators, and our worlds as neutral ground. You turned our gift into ash and glass. We will not be mediating this war. We will be ending it." The Galactic Council, which had remained neutral throughout the conflict, finally tried to intervene. Council Speaker Zornathan contacted both sides, offering to host peace negotiations. Chen's reply was equally cold. The Galactic Council had 3 centuries to prevent this war. When genocide was committed against our diplomatic capital, you chose to monitor the situation. There will be no negotiations until the Zephyrian Confederation surrenders unconditionally. Meanwhile, the siege of Zephyr Prime continued, without a single shot being fired. The planet's infrastructure was completely under human control. Food distribution networks delivered supplies only to civilian areas, cutting off military bases. Power grids shut down weapon manufacturing facilities while keeping hospitals and schools running. Transportation systems carried fleeing civilians to safety, while stranding military units without supplies. Emperor Kaithgar found himself trapped in his own palace, watching his empire collapse around him. His military couldn't function without computer systems. His fleets couldn't coordinate without communication networks. His people were abandoning him for an enemy that offered better protection than their own government. Sir Admiral Korath requests permission to negotiate local surrender terms for the remaining fleet, General Vextar reported. His ships are running out of supplies, and the crews are demanding to be allowed to evacuate their families. Kaithgar stared out his palace windows at the city below. Zephyrian civilians were holding peaceful demonstrations, demanding an end to the war. Human psychological warfare had convinced his own people that continuing to fight would only bring more destruction. The final blow came when Dr. Vasquez broadcast a message directly to every Zephyrian military unit. Attention Zephyrian Armed Forces. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez of Terran Military Intelligence. Your emperor led you into an illegal war based on false assumptions about human capabilities. Your continued resistance will only result in the deaths of your own people. We offer you the same choice we have offered everyone: surrender and live, or continue fighting for a leader who brought genocide to innocent civilians. One by one, Zephyrian military commanders began surrendering their forces. They had seen what human warfare looked like when it targeted military objectives. They had also seen what happened to worlds that continued resisting: systematic isolation, and the collapse of everything that made civilization possible. Emperor Kaithgar sat alone in his throne room, watching reports of his final fleet commanders giving up without a fight. In 1 year, the humans had destroyed an empire that had taken centuries to build. They had done it without destroying a single civilian population center, without committing a single war crime, and while offering protection to everyone who surrendered peacefully. It was the most efficient conquest in galactic history, carried out by a species that had preferred peace right up until the moment their enemies made peace impossible. Outside his palace, human ships finally appeared in Zephyr Prime's sky. They hung there like metal clouds, waiting for his decision. Kaithgar knew he had only one choice left. Emperor Kaithgar walked slowly to the communication console in his empty palace. His advisors had fled. His guards had surrendered. His empire was gone. Outside, human warships waited silently in the sky above Zephyr Prime, their weapons powered down but their message clear. The war was over. Kaithgar activated the emergency broadcast system one final time. His voice would reach every surviving Zephyrian in the galaxy, and every other species watching to see how this conflict would end. I am Emperor Kaithgar, of the former Zephyrian Confederation. After 1 year of war against the Terran Federation, I formally surrender all Zephyrian military forces. I accept full responsibility for the attack on New Geneva and submit to human authority for judgment. The transmission ended. Across Zephyrian space, the last resistance units laid down their weapons. The galaxy's most militaristic empire had been defeated by a species they had dismissed as soft peacekeepers. Admiral Chen received the surrender aboard her flagship. Around her, the command staff worked quietly to begin the massive task of managing a defeated empire. But Chen wasn't thinking about administration. She was thinking about her grandchildren, who had died in the glass ruins of New Geneva. Admiral, Emperor Kaithgar is requesting terms, Commander Torres reported. Chen nodded. Standard occupation protocols. Military forces to be disarmed and interned. War criminals to be identified for trial. Civilian populations to be protected and provided humanitarian aid. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her station. Ma'am, What about the Emperor himself? Chen was quiet for a moment. He will face trial for genocide under galactic law, the same laws his forces violated when they glassed New Geneva. The trials began 3 months later, on a rebuilt space station in neutral territory. Human legal experts worked alongside judges from across the galaxy to ensure the proceedings followed every rule of galactic justice. It was important that the rest of the galaxy see this as justice, not revenge. Emperor Katefgar sat in the defendant's chair, listening to testimony about the New Geneva massacre. Survivors described watching their families turn to glass. Alien diplomats who had escaped the attack talked about the children they had seen die during what should have been a celebration of peace. The evidence was overwhelming. Katefgar had personally authorized the use of glass bombs against civilian targets. He had planned the attack to maximize casualties among diplomatic personnel. He had intentionally targeted the Festival of Unity to send a message about the price of opposing Zephyrian expansion. When the judges asked for his defense, Katefgar stood slowly. I have no defense. I believed humans were weak because they chose peace over conquest. I was wrong about their weakness. I was also wrong about their choice. The sentence was life imprisonment on Restoration Station. A reformed penal world where prisoners worked to rebuild what their actions had destroyed. Katefgar would spend his remaining years helping to construct monuments to peace and housing for war refugees. It was a human form of justice. Punishment that served a constructive purpose. But the real change in the galaxy went far beyond one war criminal's fate. Ambassador Marcus Webb, one of the few human diplomats to survive New Geneva, had been appointed Director of Galactic Relations. His first task was to establish the new diplomatic protocols that would prevent another catastrophe like the Zephyrian War. Webb stood before the reformed Galactic Council, addressing species that had learned to see humanity in a completely different way. The Terran Federation returns to its traditional role as mediators and peacekeepers, he announced. But the galaxy should understand that our preference for peace comes from strength, not weakness. Behind him, a holographic display showed the current human fleet. Over 4,000 warships, the most advanced military force in galactic history. Hidden shipyards capable of producing hundreds more vessels. Defense networks that could protect any system in human space from invasion. This is what we choose instead of war, Webb continued. We prefer to build rather than destroy. We prefer to negotiate rather than conquer. But we are very good at war when peaceful solutions become impossible. The new galactic order that emerged was subtly but fundamentally different from what had come before. Trade agreements now included clauses about peaceful dispute resolution. Military expansion required approval from human-monitored peacekeeping forces. Most importantly, any species that attacked civilian populations would face the full weight of human military power. The merchant guilds, having learned the cost of abandoning their human partners, begged to restore their trade relationships. Guildmaster Seklon personally traveled to Earth to negotiate new agreements. We deeply regret our decision to abandon trade with humanity during the crisis, he told Webb. We hope to rebuild the commercial relationships that benefited both our peoples. Webb's response was polite but pointed. The Terran Federation is willing to resume trade relationships with species that demonstrate commitment to peaceful commerce. However, we will require guarantees that our merchants and diplomats will be protected in your territory. The implied threat was clear. Human merchants would be protected by the same military force that had defeated the Zephyrian Confederation in 18 months. Dr. Vasquez established the memorial archives on the ruins of New Geneva, where the complete history of the war was preserved alongside the names of everyone who had died in the attack. The archives became a pilgrimage site for species across the galaxy, a place where they could understand both the price of peace and the cost of its destruction. The main exhibit was a recreation of the Festival of Unity, as it had been moments before the attack. Holographic families held hands in crystal gardens. Children of a dozen species played together in parks that would become graveyards. Alien diplomats danced with human officials in celebration of another year of peace. The display ended with the glass bombs falling, but visitors weren't shown the destruction. Instead, they saw the aftermath. Human rescue workers pulling survivors from the ruins. Human doctors treating wounded aliens. Human engineers beginning the work of rebuilding what had been destroyed. The final exhibit was the most powerful. A simple hologram showed the New Geneva rising from the crystal ash. Human children played in rebuilt gardens where alien diplomats once again walked as friends. The memorial was beautiful, but it was also functional. A working city where the business of galactic peace continued. Below the hologram, an inscription appeared in every known language. They gave us peace. We chose war. They chose to build again. Choose wisely. The crystalline Vorthans, who had remained neutral during the war, sent an official delegation to the memorial. Their ambassador, a being of living crystal who communicated through harmonious vibrations, expressed their species' new understanding. We did not help when our friends were attacked because we believed violence was never the answer, the Vorthans sang. We have learned that sometimes violence is the only language that bullies understand. We pledge our support to human peacekeeping efforts. The Machine Intelligence Collective, which had calculated humanity's chances of survival at 2.3%, sent a different kind of message. Our algorithms failed to account for variables beyond visible military assets. We have updated our analysis protocols to better understand the relationship between restraint and capability. We request renewed cooperation with human strategic planning systems. Even the hegemony of suns, humanity's only allies during the war, approached the new relationship with greater respect. We supported Earth during the crisis because we opposed Zephyrian expansion, their ambassador admitted. We did not fully understand what we were supporting. The galaxy is safer with humanity as its guardians. Admiral Chen stood in her new office, overlooking the rebuilt diplomatic quarter of New Geneva. Outside her window, construction crews were putting the finishing touches on the Peace Memorial Garden, where representatives from across the galaxy would meet to resolve disputes before they became wars. Dr. Vasquez joined her at the window. "Ma'am, the conversion of our military assets is proceeding on schedule. We'll maintain our current fleet at full readiness, but the shipyards are switching back to civilian production." Chen nodded. "Good. How are the former Zephyrian territories adapting to the new administration?" "Better than expected," Vasquez replied. "Most of their colony worlds are asking to join the Terran Federation voluntarily. They've seen the difference between human governance and Zephyrian conquest. Our approach to protecting civilian populations has made us quite popular." Chen smiled. The galaxy had learned its lesson, but so had humanity. They had discovered that their capacity for war was as great as their desire for peace. The knowledge was sobering but also empowering. They would never again be dismissed as weak because they chose negotiation over conquest. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Ambassador Webb appeared on Chen's communication screen, speaking from the main council chambers. "Admiral, we have a situation developing in the Outer Rim. 2 species are disputing mineral rights on an asteroid field. Both sides are mobilizing fleets." Chen straightened. "Understood. How do you want to handle it?" Webb smiled. "The old way. With one important difference. I'm requesting a human peacekeeping fleet to escort our negotiation team, just to make sure everyone remembers the importance of diplomatic solutions." Chen nodded. "I'll have Admiral Torres deploy the 3rd Fleet. They'll arrive ahead of your diplomatic mission." As Webb's image faded, Chen looked out at the rebuilt city below. Human children played in gardens where alien visitors walked as friends. Diplomatic shuttles from dozens of species landed at the spaceport. The Festival of Unity would be celebrated again next year, with better security but the same spirit of cooperation. The galaxy had peace again, built on the foundation of human strength. Every species now understood that humanity's preference for negotiation came not from weakness, but from wisdom. They were very good at war, which was exactly why they chose peace instead. And in the depths of space, hidden shipyards maintained humanity's military capabilities, ready to defend the peace they had rebuilt from the ashes of New Geneva. The galaxy had learned to choose wisely. If they ever forgot, humanity would be ready to remind them.